welcome to a very special edition of Women's Herstory with Alice in Danger. In this special edition, we are going to focus on West Coast talent. There's a lot of different regions around the world. You got Japanese, you got your East Coast, you got your Canadians, you got your British, your Europeans. But today, we're going to focus on the West Coast because a lot of the women there kind of get, I wouldn't say thrown on the rug, but they don't get the recognition they deserve. So I reached out to a very, very good friend of mine who I love and I miss, and I'm so glad to be talking to him. So we are bringing in ring announcer extraordinaire from the West Coast, Josh Shibata. Yay!
Hey, thanks for having me, Danger. And yeah, I missed you so much too. It was really nice. We talked for quite a bit before we started recording, and it was really nice. I miss hanging out with you and the fam, so it's good to see you.
Oh, I try to do it to get some of the digression out of the way, because if you've watched the previous episodes, some of us get lost on tangents, mostly me, you know, I start talking hockey or something, then we just completely off the subject. We're 20 minutes into this episode and it's like, oh yeah, we should probably talk about wrestling. So
Right.
But yay. How have you been? How are you dealing with the pandemic?
Been good. Since day one of the pandemic, which seems like a lifetime ago, I've just been doing the same thing that I always do, just take it day by day, just trying to stay as positive as possible. It's especially being based in LA, which is very much a hot zone. The whole state of California is very much a hot zone. It's a little rough, but again, you gotta be as positive as possible. Follow the rules, face masks, social distancing. Just try to be more part of a solution than trying to be part of the problem. And hopefully we can all get this together. Obviously, missing what I love doing which is ring announcing wrestling and working on wrestling shows. And of course, missing all the wonderful people that I've formed friendships and relationships with over the time, including you yourself, Danger. So I miss all you guys. And hopefully, it's looking good right now. So hopefully we can keep the trend going. And 2020 is very much a wash for everybody. I don't think anybody can say 2020 is their year. So let's just hope 2021 can be everybody's year.
Yeah, we want to skip that. Well, that's part of why I started the show, is to just bring something positive to 2020, at least when the year ends, and hopefully things magically go back to normal on January 1st. People can be like, 2020 really wasn't great. But hey, I learned some stuff about wrestling and I got to do this and stuff. And yeah, but I miss you coming to Vegas and ring announcing, because it means we go have food and like Korean barbecue, or we go to that ramen place by my house. And
there's some great places in Vegas. If people go, if you are able to travel to Vegas, there's a lot of great places to eat over there.
Oh yeah. I didn't put this Vegas weight on my own, The city has helped tremendously. But I see you and I are going through the same hair situation in the pandemic.
Yeah, well, again, it's hard to find a barber where we can do the social distancing haircuts. But fortunately, I have a significant other that doesn't mind my hair being so long. This actually, not to go too much on my tangent, but Danger, I've never had my hair this long since I was in kindergarten. So it's been a long, long time.
I'm not gonna lie. I would love to see a picture at some point of kindergarten Shibata.
I could probably find one. I'll see if I can dig one up for you.
Yes, I love it.
But to be honest, it's gonna look like every prototypical Asian boy with like the bowl cut and just a big smile. I guarantee you, if you see it, you're gonna just go like, it looks like every other Asian kid. So,
no, I'm gonna know it's you. I better know it's you. Otherwise, I'm a friend.
Sure, no worries.
So the reason why I brought you on is because I feel, given that you work a lot on the West Coast, that you are probably one of the most versed people to come join me and help educate. Because I know a lot of the names, but I'm sure there's some names that I'm missing that deserve a little bit of recognition, a little bit of the spotlight, especially once all this is done and we start doing shows again. I'd really like to see new faces and new
of course.
I always like to try and have my thumb on the pulse of everything happening. So I figured you coming in would be a wonderful help. And you get the honor of being the first male guest on Women's Herstory.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's a big honor. Thank you, Danger.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
that.
No, thank you for saying yes when I asked you.
Oh, of course. If anything, I love talking about wrestling. You know, been a fan since. Funny enough, because it does kind of coincide with women involved with wrestling. My mother was actually the one that got me into wrestling. You know, because she was somewhat of a small time fan. She grew up with Gorgeous George, Freddie Blassie. And I was sick one day, and this was back when you could go to Blockbuster Video, Warehouse. She rented WrestleMania 3. And, you know, I was sick. I was watching, didn't know what was going on. As soon as Hogan slammed Andre, bam, that was it. I was hooked. And so it was because of my mom. If my mom didn't rent that video for me while I was sick, never, I mean, maybe I would have got into wrestling, but my mom really was the one that allowed me to get into wrestling. So
How does she feel about you now being in wrestling?
you know, typical Asian parent. She's all like, okay, do they pay you? You know, or it's like, are you going to be on TV? You know, it's the typical Asian parent. You know, once you know, I make appearances here and there, and then she's like, oh my God, that's so amazing. But if I'm not making appearances, you know, running house shows or doing small little indies, she's like, okay, that's not so impressive.
Did your mom have other career ideas for you?
Oh, of course. You know, typical, wanted me to be a doctor, wanted me to be a lawyer. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a doctor or a lawyer. And then, though she was very supportive once I started liking acting and being in front of a camera. But of course, wanting to kind of steer it towards something that can actually make money. So it's like broadcast journalism. You can be a news journalist. You can be on TV as a news anchor, you know. So she was always trying to find some way to turn that creative spark into something that actually can make money. So,
But that's smart.
yeah, no, I mean, it's she's looking out for me, so it's great. But deep down inside, she's always been supportive of a lot of things that I do. So I've been very grateful for that.
That's nice. Now, I know you ended up on the cover of a book this year. And
Yeah.
and how did your mom feel about that?
Oh, of course. Then it's like, oh my God, you're on a book cover, and she rushed to like the stores to find it, and that's when she's proud. Because again, when I tell her, it's like, yeah, so I'm on a book cover, and she goes, "Who's the author? Like, is it gonna be a popular book? Like all of this? Like, well, so how big is this? Like, is this just gonna be like some little book that no one cares about? You know?" But then once it was released and she saw it in stores, then it's like, oh, so she, you know, I bought her a copy, but she bought her sister, my aunt, a copy. So now she's real happy about that. So yeah. So again, it's when it starts to like make actual like some big waves, then she's really, really supportive. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, okay, that's cool, I guess, you know. So
I want to meet your mom so bad.
she's great. Not to dwell too much into my private life, but you know, my girlfriend Leva is actually very much like my mom, scary enough. So considering you are very close to Leva, I'm sure you and my mom would hit it off really, really well. Cause you know, again, kind of scary for me, but there are a lot of similarities between the two where I'm kind of like, oh boy, that's geez.
What have I done?
Right, exactly. What have I done? But yeah, she's great. She's great.
Oh, speaking of her, I miss her. I just want to say that I love her
She
so
says
much.
hi, by the way.
Oh,
was
does
texting her
she?
beforehand. She says hi.
Nice. I was in Montana and I found a Keanu Reeves coloring book at
Oh,
a random Walmart, and I
sure.
texted her. I'm like, girl. She goes, I'm gonna go get that now.
She has it. She already has
She
it.
does. She does.
Yeah.
She sent me a picture. Oh, man,
Yeah.
she's the best. We had so much fun together.
Oh yeah, she's and she always speaks so highly of you, you know, because of everything that you've done for her, protecting her in the industry, which, you know, as a woman it's scary, still scary, even to this point. But she's been very, very lucky to have a supportive staff like you behind her, so it helps a lot. So she's always been very grateful for that.
Well, and I don't think she realized how important she was for me, especially when we came together as a tag team,
Mm-hmm.
because I felt very stale in my character.
Mm,
I'm pressing with Prazak. I'm like, we got to do something. We got to do something. You got,
sure.
and he's like, I don't think the fans would accept you as a heel, and it's kind of hard for you to be heel if they know you're the Office. And I'm like, I need something. And then Leva and I, of course, bonded over our love of like Doctor Who and whatnot. And then it was like the idea of, well, maybe we should tag. And at that point, I was starting to have some real bad injuries that were really taking their time healing. So I felt like a tag was going to be the best situation for him. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like personality wise, we would have so much fun. And then Leva was into it. And then it was the whole combining of her gimmick, the cosplay with bringing me
Right.
into it. And like the fact that she opened up her gimmick that was just so quintessential her and bringing me
Mm.
into that fold. Like I just, professionally, I'm so grateful for her. Personally, I'm so thankful that she's in my life. And, she's one of those people through wrestling. It's like, I don't just love her, but like, I'm going to love her like till the end of time.
Oh yeah.
You know how you
No.
get those friendships where it's like, it's great. And then once wrestling ends, you're like, you kind of go your
Sure.
separate ways. Like with
Sure.
her, it's like, no, man,
Yeah.
she's got a life sentence with me.
Yeah, no, she is
So.
definitely. I mean, obviously, that's why I love her so much. She definitely has that personality that attracts people, and you kind of don't want to necessarily lose that connection. So,
Yeah.
yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing.
She's the best, but she ain't West Coast.
No, she's not. She's
She's
not.
not. No, no. I guess we could call her a Midwestern kind of gal.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because she was born and raised there before moving to the east. But we do have a lot of really talented women on the West Coast. Actually, we also have a lot of transplants over from other areas that now call the West Coast home. I don't know how you wanna start with it, but we can always talk about someone that actually has a relationship with Leva,
Let's
if
do
you
it.
want. Okay, so like she's one that a lot of people have liked a lot, and she, like I said, has a relationship with Leva. They were tag team partners, former tag team Shimmer champions together. Delilah Doom. She originated in the Midwest, but then about 3 or 4 years ago moved out to Cali, and since then she's pretty much called Cali home. But Delilah Doom is very much similar, I feel, to Leva Bates, where she has this infectious personality that a lot of people gravitate to. If we want to talk about the technical side, what I think really makes people want to watch her is the way that she sells and the way that she really gets fans emotionally invested into her match, especially when she plays the babyface in peril. But she's just super talented, a wonderful person, one of those people that I feel doesn't get nearly as much attention or credit, but she could be a big star anywhere. She's obviously, again, made appearances in Shimmer, former tag team champion. She's made appearances in Rise. So yeah, she's definitely one to watch out for once this pandemic ends and people start wrestling again. I'm hoping to see her start to make her way again across the country. But Delilah Doom is one of those really top talented wrestlers.
I remember being at the Shimmer commentary table when she first came out, and I'm sitting there going, starting to get a little dance going. I'm like, why am I
Mm-hmm.
dancing? That's
Sure.
Sparkles. Oh yes, fellow Canadian. Here we go. And then let's go to the mall hits. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, I
There you
did
go.
this. And then a little bit with Delilah, like she has the fitness gimmick,
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. And then certain ways that she would move in the ring kind of reminded me a little bit of Sumi Sakai.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Japanese wrestler, East Coast
Mm-hmm.
based, Philadelphia based kind of gal. I saw a little bit of Sumi in her, and I always had a wonderful time. Every match I ever had with Sumi always ends with a smile because she's crazy, and
Mm-hmm.
she's fun to work with. And so yeah, I remember seeing her. Um, I try not to acknowledge that her and Leva were tag team champs together because somehow I couldn't make that happen for Bates, but Doom did.
Aw,
So, there's a little butting of the heads there. But yeah.
sure,
So
sure.
there's a lot of good, like there's young talent, but like if we go take it back, I mean, a lot of times people will consider Victoria one of the original West Coast girls, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with Lisa Marie, for me, when I understood who she was already on TV. So it
Right.
never really came down to, I considered her West Coast, because in my
Right.
head, when I think West Coast, I'm always thinking of independent talent.
Right.
And
Right.
my introduction to her was right on TV. So,
Right.
but
Right.
she was a big part of the West Coast scene, and did stuff there in her downtime between companies, right?
Yeah, yeah. She did a lot of stuff with UPW, which was then became the feeder system to the WWE, where a lot of not necessarily female talent, but a lot of the male talent, obviously like the John Cena's, the Samoa Joes, a lot of them started to trickle into. But there are a lot of females talent that are really big names now that are not recognized as West Coast. Another one is Melina, WWE former diva. She started. There's a school that's still going on right now called the School of Hard Knocks. Jesse Hernandez in San Bernardino with EWF, and Melina came from there. Amazing Kong came from there. And again, I don't think a lot of people realize that Amazing Kong was a West Coast trainee. And then, of course, one of the biggest names right now, Candice LeRae,
Mm-hmm.
was an EWF girl. So for the time, EWF was the factory that was producing some amazing women talent, which this is early 2000s, which is really remarkable because there really wasn't that much women talent to begin with in general and almost anywhere. I mean, Danger, you know that because you were starting your career around that same time. You know, unfortunately, women's wrestling was very much treated the same way in the independent scene as it was on the main show, as just an attraction with women that may or may not have been as athletic as you would want them to be, but are just, you know, there for pretty faces. So to find another woman to wrestle with, a lot of these girls, you know, they couldn't. And a lot of them would just have to wrestle each other constantly from promotion to promotion. So the fact that EWF was able to produce a Melina, an Amazing Kong, a Candice LeRae is really, really impressive for its time. And they're still around right now. You know, just to plug them, even though it's not necessarily really supposed to be a show to plug things. But EWF, if any woman wants to go for a good wrestling school, Jesse Hernandez, I don't know if they're still open right now because of the pandemic, but I know they're still running. So if you look up on Facebook, EWF Jesse Hernandez School of Hard Knocks, it's a very good, reputable school for both men and women. But yeah, Candice LeRae is one that I definitely want to focus on just because, you know, there's certain women, and there's going to be another one that I'm going to mention a little bit later that really kind of opened the door for the SoCal version or the West Coast version of the women's revolution. And Candice LeRae would be one of them because at the time, I remember going to PWG shows, and this is way back on, you know, the very first PWG show, year 1 and 2 and 3, when there really weren't women on the show or women wrestlers, and Candice LeRae was the only one. But she made her mark in intergender matches. She had the very first intergender match and probably one of the best storylines in PWG or in early PWG history when she was the valet of the Human Tornado. And the Human Tornado started to become this abusive person to Candice and would just beat on her after matches or yell at her in between matches until it became a feud, and they blew it off in this huge, bloody, no disqualification match. And Candice LeRae just made her name from that. And again, first time a lot of us ever saw intergender matches. Kind of was happenstance because there was no one else for Candice LeRae to wrestle anyway. But she made her mark there. And then, of course, for those who really want to see a really great match, I feel that kind of set the bar for Candice LeRae in her career at the time. She was the co-holder of the PWG tag team titles, and she defended the belt in a handicap match against the Young Bucks in what's called a guerrilla warfare match, which is basically a no DQ, which involves tables, ladders, and chairs, because of course it's a Young Bucks match. And Candice LeRae was a bloody mess at the end of that match, but it really put her, like, that's where I think everybody took attention to Candice LeRae. And so it's really great to see her now in NXT, again, representing the West Coast and just, you know, seeing how far she's gone. So I think Candice LeRae is one of the few women that really opened the door for a lot of other women and to come into the West Coast or, you know, into wrestling in general on the independent scene.
Yeah, I'd heard about her in the early days of PWG. My introduction to PWG was actually Sarah Del Rey because she
Sure.
wrestled in the very early starts of her career as Nikki, but we'll get to her in a little bit when we
Hmm.
start traveling up the coast a bit. But
Hmm.
I remember hearing about that match with the Young Bucks, and I saw the pictures, and I mean, she looks like my
Yeah.
brother. Like
Yeah,
in
yeah,
like the
yeah.
height
She
of his
looked
like
like a she
ECW
looked
days,
like
she looked like a
Carino.
Carino,
Yep.
the
Yep.
blonde hair, the crimson mask,
Hair
and I'm
all
like,
over the place, big smile on her face. Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, no,
Oh
no.
yeah.
But I think that broke it open, and then from the West Coast, she did move to the Midwest and moved around.
Sure.
But she had already established that name for herself. She came in the Shimmer, had some great matches. There was one match with Kaylee Ray that
Hmm.
just was just fantastic. I remember watching it going, this might be my favorite match of the show.
Hmm. Hmm.
It told a great story. It was very, very physical. And she really worked hard to build that name and to make herself something, which is
Hmm.
great because now, she's in NXT. She is connected with Johnny, her husband. But I
Hmm.
love the fact that she had established herself before she established herself as a team with Johnny. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important with a lot of men and women, both in wrestling, that
Hmm.
the package deals don't always work.
Right.
Mike and Maria,
Hmm.
they work beautifully.
Right.
Miz and Maurice work beautifully. But I
Right.
remember being coming up on the East Coast where some people were package deals and it was like, oh, it doesn't work. It
Right.
doesn't
Right.
work.
Right. Right.
Establish yourself as individuals and then establish yourself as a team. So, but
Hmm.
yeah, you got to give a lot of props to Candice. And a lot of people, when they think West Coast, they really focus on the SoCal scene.
Yes.
And there was a lot going on. One person that doesn't get much love for the West Coast that should, because she was wonderful to work with, New York Knockout.
Yeah.
Remember
Yes.
Nikki? I
Yes.
loved working with her, like to the point
Sure.
that when I had to work in California, I would stay at her house. I would forego a hotel just to stay with her.
Ah.
And Nikki and I used to have the most fun in matches. We were ridiculous. But yeah, and she's since retired and it was a very quiet
Yeah.
retirement. And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think she got the props that she deserved.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I mean, but it's everywhere. There's a lot of people that have had careers that are still around to this day, but definitely not on the level that if they maybe popped out 10, 15 years later,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden would be like just huge,
Yeah.
and it's just a shame, but it's all about timing sometimes, unfortunately. And and again, it's both men and women, both West and East Coast. For every name you can say on the West Coast, there's somebody on the East Coast that like, oh man, if they were around today, they would be huge.
Yeah.
One name, it's not a woman, but one name, just because unfortunately he passed away recently, but Xavier is a guy that, I remember watching him. And if you want to talk about heel heat, like, god damn, everyone hates him. But, unless you were a Ring of Honor fan around day one, not too many people remember him, But if he came up like around now, instantly he would be in NXT or on the main roster in WWE, or somewhere, making, because I mean, he had such great charisma, and again, it just, unfortunately, some people's careers just happen not to blossom as well.
And he was the nicest guy too. Like he was
That's
fun
what I've
because
heard.
we worked together at Ring of Honor,
Right,
and
right.
he'd be in the ring and we'd be watching him. He'd come in the back and he'd crack a joke with you. And he
Sure.
was a little more quiet than the other New York guys, but yeah, he was always so nice. And when I got that news, it hurt. It stung because we're like OG ROH peeps, and
Right.
it's always sad when you lose somebody, but it's sad when you lose like one of your own. But
Yeah.
um, with coming up, going back to Candice and whatnot, and Nikki not being able to kind of break out the way she should have,
Sure.
two other people, and they kind of, because they come from similar areas,
Hmm.
closer to the San Francisco area, two people that tend to be combined together when it talks about California breakouts,
Hmm.
cheerleader Melissa and Sarah
Yep.
Del Rey. And Del
Yep.
Rey, my introduction to her was as Nikki PWG. I think she did the Tango and Cash
Hang on
Invitational.
Cash Invitational. Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
which I actually named my fist Tango and Cash after that invitation because they invite you to go. Um,
Sure. There
but
you
you know,
go.
Del Rey, all bias aside, probably the number one female wrestler ever.
Mm,
Like
okay.
just like in terms of skill, in terms of
Sure.
understanding. I mean, Danielson was her coach,
Right.
and you could see it with Del Rey. The
Mm,
natural athleticism blossomed. You
hmm
know, if you look at me, I wasn't the most natural athlete in the ring, and I can acknowledge that and I can admit that. So I had
hmm
to make up for it in shenanigans and personality. But
Sure.
and she takes you to the ground and she hooks an arm and she just
hmm
lifts her chest and just kind of stops and looks around. You're like, this is a woman who owns the ring. You
Yep.
don't have that. And so
Yep.
I think that was a big thing. And Del Rey built her name up and built her name up. And then she go into Japan and then she went to Mexico and then
Mhm.
she moved over to the East Coast. Oddly enough, we were roommates for like 3 months before I took off to England. She came with me for a little bit and then she went back to Philadelphia and jumped in with ROH, jumped in with Chikara, and really exploded that way. But you couldn't be a woman in the mid 2000s and not know who Del Rey was.
Right.
And she's a ring general.
Oh yeah.
She
Well,
was, and she was a locker room general too.
well, that's why then she gets the job with WWE. I mean, granted, I'm sure a lot of, and again, we're talking about timing. I'm sure a lot of people would have loved to have seen Sarah Del Rey as the women's champion in WWE, but it just, I mean, I don't know her personally, but I'm sure at that point of her career, maybe she realized it would be more beneficial if she gave her knowledge to the new crop of talent instead. You know, instead of being the star in the ring, she'll be the star outside of the ring, or at least creating new stars. So yeah, no, again, like you said, Sarah Del Rey, early 2000s was definitely like the name that popped up everywhere when it came to women's wrestling. And you mentioned it, and this was the one that I was alluding to. Cheerleader Melissa is the other one, definitely. I mean, I feel, and I know it's a little argument now because of what you just stated about Sarah Del Rey, but I think when you think about West Coast, SoCal, even though she's not I think she was first born in up north and then came down the south, but that's just semantics. But I would think the epitome of SoCal women's wrestling is Cheerleader Melissa. Small world. She's actually the very first wrestler I ever interviewed, and I interviewed her for my high school newspaper because she and the Ballard brothers, because before she became a wrestler, she was a valet for the Ballard brothers. Very talented. Again, a tag team, I feel, if they came about 10 or 15 years later, would have signed easily WWE or whatever. But it's just, it was too early. You know, they kind of got stuck in the indies. But I digress. But Melissa was the valet. They were doing a show at my high school. And so I went to interview them. And so this is Melissa. I think it was literally year one of her career when I met her. And now, so many years later, you know, I'm working with her and Shimmer and all the promotions in Cali, and it's amazing, you know, how small the world could be. But I remember just growing up, and again, not too many wrestlers for her to wrestle with, but God, from going to just being the ballet, the pretty cheerleader for the Ballards, who would do like a high spot, you know, every match or so just to help out her team, to becoming one of the most respected veterans in the locker room, having a great career in Shimmer, being a former champion there, being going over to Japan, working for Arison, which at the time Arison was the Japanese promotion for women's wrestling, and then now working with Stardom as well when they came over to America. I mean, again, and then of course having other careers in other places. Cheerleader Melissa is again, another woman I feel really kicked open the door for women's wrestling, to make people pay attention that there is such a thing as women's wrestling in the independent scene on the West Coast.
And to add to that, one of the things I think Melissa has done was really open the door for what I had coined at one time American Joshi, which is more of the women doing the strong style. She
Right.
started doing it. I started doing it
Hmm.
because before she went over to Japan, she stayed for 3 months. She did, well, no, it was, hold on, let me get my timing right.
Okay.
I came after her.
Hmm.
So when that company closed down and became A to Z, I was
Hmm.
the first American that went over there. It was
Mm.
me, and then April Hunter landed like 2 days later. So
Hmm.
Del Rey had stayed over there for like months at a time, and then Del Rey would come home, Melissa would go over for like
Hmm.
3 months at a time. And so both of them brought that Japanese style over. I brought it back with me, and
Hmm.
that's when the more Americanized version of it started to pick up steam, and we started taking it to Shimmer, and we would take it to Chikara. Daisy Hayes would bring it in and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
Daisy.
they're good old Daisy, yeah.
Mhm.
But she falls in the Midwest category.
Right, right, right.
Love her. But yeah, Melissa really opened up that door for that female strong style to really take over in the US. And I have been on the receiving end of multiple
Oh, I'm
strong
sure.
style matches. It's up actually on Click Wrestle. It's a match from her and I in 2007 for the Queen's Cup final. And I
Uh,
was showing it to a mutual student of ours who I consider a West Coast person, Lacey Ryan. And she's like,
we're gonna talk about her in the future too. We're gonna
my
talk about her in a couple.
my two moms are fighting. And she's like, why does Melissa hate you so much? And I'm like,
Oh,
I don't know, but that match hurt. That was the
oh, sure.
introduction of the wheelbarrow through the chairs spot that Melissa went on to do with
Uh,
other people. But that
sure.
started, yeah, she started doing that on me through chairs.
Yeah,
So,
I gotta
yeah.
say,
Mm.
one of the scariest moments, though Leva claims she didn't feel anything. One of the scariest moments was when Melissa dropped Leva with God, it's not the burning hammer, but
Air raid crash?
with the air raid crash. Oh my God! I literally jumped up and yelled because I just thought like I thought she hurt Leva. I was like, oh God! And Leva's like, nope, nope, didn't feel a thing, you know. And so, but that's the beauty of what Melissa does because, like you said, it's that strong style, which again, so many people, wrestlers too, misinterpret that it means to really lay it in and hurt. It's not supposed to hurt people. It's just supposed to look realistic. And she does that so well. Like you said, Lacey was mentioning, like, why does it look like she hates you so much? And it's not. It's just that it looks like she does because that's the art of the style is to make it look real, to make it look intense. And you're right because Melissa, when she was the Ballard's ballet, she was more of a high flyer. She was more doing the lucha stuff because again, that's flashy. She's small, right? But then she realized, hey, the money is in this strong style, and that not only can men do it, but women can too, and it
Mm-hmm.
works. And yeah, it's again, she definitely, I feel, really just one of the. If you want to talk about women's wrestling in the West Coast, you have to talk about Cheerleader
Oh,
Melissa. You
no
can't
doubt.
ignore it.
You can't ignore her at all. And she was definitely one of the pioneers of the women's strong style revolution that kind of took over and left me bruised and battered and beaten. But I gave as good as I got, I like to think.
Sure,
Um,
sure, sure.
but yeah, you got Melissa, you got Kong, who really made her name over in Japan, more
Right,
so than the West Coast, but she's a West Coast girl. She's a
right,
California girl.
right. Yep.
She
School of Hard Knocks, EWF.
Yep.
Same school, like I said, that made Candice and Melina. And yeah, again, lots of people don't realize that's where she started and called home was on the West Coast. And now, she's former knockouts champion, working with AEW. I still believe right now. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and again, at the time, I remember hearing about Amazing Kong, and of course, you're going, wait, aren't you talking about Aja Kong? No, 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 no. There's this other girl called Amazing Kong, and just yeah, she definitely, I think guy or girl, you wouldn't want to wrestle with Amazing Kong because she just looks so intimidating, and it worked, and she worked it so well. But
Oh,
again, one of the sweetest people I've heard. I haven't met her personally, but Leva says one of the sweetest people in the world.
she is an absolute hoot. We were a team over in Japan. We were
Mm-hmm.
the Real Evil Monsters, REM. And so I remember, I'm going to tell this funny story with her. It was me, her, and Panther Claw.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
she was Tranisha with WWE. She was a Diva Search girl
Oh, okay. Okay.
who didn't get in, ended up going over to Japan, right? We were her
Hmm.
first tour, the one with me and Kong, and that at that point, that's my third tour, right? So we're the Real
Hmm.
Evil Monsters. We land in Tokyo. I get picked up at the airport. They're like, we're gonna go right over to the building first. We went to the 01 building office, and you gotta do a quick promo. And I'm like, okay. So first off, you got tall, gorgeous Tranisha. You got little old me, and then you got tall, fun Kong. And so immediately
Sure.
stick me in the middle. They're like, this is where you belong. I'm like, okay. And so I'm just smiling, nodding, doing what I got to say. I'm so jet lagged. And it was the Nanae Takahashi 10-year tour,
Okay.
10-year show. Okay, her
Hmm.
anniversary show. That was going to be on a Friday night. And then the next night was the Shinya Hashimoto Memorial Show, right?
Okay.
So we're getting ready. We're doing the promo for the Nanae Takahashi show. And the posters all have Takahashi like rock star style.
Hmm.
Microphone, rocket on, yes. So we're doing the promo and I'm cutting my stuff and I'm like, yeah, blah, 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 hitting my stuff. Yeah, Tranisha, right? Yeah, Kong. Kong's got her back to me. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? She had turned and gotten a Sharpie and turned the microphone into genitalia. And yeah. So in all the craziness, our stream has frozen. So what I'm going to do is we're going to leave this as a part one. We're going to get Josh back on another day and we're going to do part two. And we want to focus on the more current talent that we have on the West Coast scene. Your Heather Monroes, your Nicole Savoys, your Ruby Razes, your Lacey Ryan, so on and so forth, because we can go so much deeper. Thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate you being here. Remember, wash your hands, wear a mask, love one another, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.